Some episodes are definitely worth the wait, and this was one of them. I have been trying to schedule Moshe Gersht on the show for, 9 months, and finally we connected. Moshe is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author, international speaker, and spiritual teacher. As a modern mystic, his profound work has garnered accolades and respect from global thought leaders and experts in both consciousness and personal growth. Our talk today covered everything from spiritual awakening to what are the conditions you need to do to open yourself up more to spirituality, to how signs and synchronicities show up for you and continue to unfold the more time you spend finding them. So if you are curious about this, if you want to know what a spiritual awakening actually looks like, then today's podcast is for you. And with that, I bring you today's episode with Moshe Gersht.
We need at our table of awareness the logician, but equally we need the intuitive, we need the mystic.
I almost died. I was allowed to go to the very precipice of death, of life and death, and look over the edge. And I was allowed to behold what was there and allowed to come back. Most people aren't.
When we talk about being aligned with ourself or being aligned with our soul or hearing our higher self, that's really what we're talking about, is being connected to that divine part of ourself, that light-filled part of us that is connected to God energy, that is connected to everybody here and every experience we've ever had.
If more doctors, more professionals can open up to use intuitive gifts in their work, that's really important.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, mediumship, near-death experiences, consciousness, and what it all means. Welcome, Moshe, to Life, Death, and the Space Between.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Amy.
So this interview has been a long time coming. We've been trying to plan this for months and months. So I'm really, really excited to talk with you today because I think you really do have this perfect merger of really bringing spirituality. And while you come from a Jewish background, you're able to really look at spirituality from a perhaps more non-religious perspective. Can you tell me how a rock star ended up, or maybe not a rock star, but a member of a rock band ends up where you are today?
You know, it's fun. First of all, thank you for the kind words. It's funny because today I have a number of friends who could truly go by the word rock star, which I don't know that I was. But we were definitely up and coming. My life was centered around music for nearly a decade, right? So my entire teenage years, I was singer-songwriter for a rock band. We were signed to a record label in LA, toured the country, radio, MTV, like that whole world.
Wow.
And yeah, it was amazing. Like what a gift to, somewhere choose that path before coming into this. And we had probably the moment that kind of shifted all of that was when one of my band members got addicted to meth. I mean, the whole rock scene, if you could imagine, is filled with. There's a reason why they say what's it, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like that's how it goes. And it was hard to see that in real time. We had a couple concerts where a band member just didn't show up, which aside from it being very embarrassing was extremely worrying because that means that a person has lost themselves.
Right.
Eventually my band members, the label, the manager, they looked to me as the kind of founder of the band, the singer songwriter, and said, look, we know he's your very close friend. But it's going to encumber any success that you have. Like if you think that you're going to do anything great in this world, if you have someone who's not showing up to concerts or to recordings or to events, it's a problem. We ask you, encourage you to consider dropping him. So I went to get some perspective, and I left to go visit my family, who at the time had moved to Israel. So it was like very far away from LA. And I went there. I spent about 10 days just kind of doing my own thing, trying to get clarity. And during that time had kind of like the seed of what felt like a spiritual awakening. It was like the beginning of a thought of what is this really all about? And when I came back from that trip, we did decide to separate from my friend, certainly for the short term. It wasn't like a forever you're gone, but it was like, we need to take a break. And over the next couple months, we were getting ready to release this new album. And at the release party, someone came up to me and said, how long are you going to do this for? And I said, do what? And he said, play music. And we're sitting there and the music's playing and everyone has a drink in their hand and everything is going really well. So I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Is he, how long are you going to play for? I said, I don't know. I guess we'll play until we're successful and then I'll settle down. I always pictured myself as a family man. Mm-hmm. And he said, when's that? I said, when's what? And he said, when's success? And I looked at him. At the time, I told him to grab another drink because he was ruining my buzz. And but I woke up the next morning, and that really sunk in. This question of like, when is that? How do we define success? Like, what does that mean to me? I never really thought about it. 20-year-old, just kind of living your heart's desire. And about a month after that, had a very powerful experience. I was walking home and like a lightning bolt opening, like an awakening experience of there were these two paths in front of me. And one path was going down a world of rock and roll. And things were going really well. We were on big tours. We were opening up for great artists. So like I could see the path of where that led. And I knew a lot of people who were already older and established, and they had kids with them on tour. So I saw what that life was like. And then I had this vision of what this other life path might look like. But I didn't know how you get there. And it wasn't clear to me what the purpose of it all was. It was intuitively knowing and intuitively good, but very unclear. And being raised as a Jewish kid from LA, instead of going to like Tibet or Bali or some other place, I ended up in Jerusalem. To try to figure out the meaning of life and what are we doing here and what is truth and what's going on behind the scene. And that was hard. That was a very hard decision to leave beyond, my friends and the audience and all these people, and started stage 2 of this life journey.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said, because you said you had the seed of spiritual awakening, which was this like, it's almost like this question sort of dropped in as like, what is the meaning of this? And then you had this moment that was almost more profound where you saw these two potential paths. Can you describe a little bit more about that experience? Because I think when people think about a spiritual awakening, they might not necessarily think about it as an ongoing process, but something that just suddenly happens, like people who have had NDEs and, Kundalini awakenings, or maybe are sitting in meditation or prayer, and suddenly they hear the voice of God and they feel like, now is the time that everything needs to change for me. But I love how you described that it was like a seed was planted and then things continued to unfold.
First of all, I'm so happy that you brought that up, because I think about that often. And I've had both. I've had about 10 years later, I had one of these lightning bolt, like everything inside of me shifted, kind of Kundalini type of shift. And so I know what that feels like, and I know what that shift in state looks like. But that's not the only version of awakening. In fact, I think it's more common to go through a process. And even those NDE lightning bolt experiences, they're coming from somewhere. They weren't rooted in nothing. And if we're paying attention, there are seeds being planted all the time. So in that reality, it was, by and large, not for everyone, but by and large, when I speak to people, I speak to, people at a talk or clients that I have, there's always a crisis point. Yeah. Almost always. There's some, okay, we hit a problem. There's a roadblock. I thought life was going one way, and then life told me something else, right? The conversation shifted. So that could be with a person's physical health. That could be in a relationship. That could be with your finances. That could be with your dreams. Like it could, your life is going one way, and then all of a sudden we hit a wall. And in that moment, it could be truly in a singular moment or in a space in time, I think that's the right word, a space or a portal opens up to receive something new. So in my world, that newness was, I was going to figure out if I was going to stay with this band member, right? Like, this is my friend. This is a big deal. We have a long lasting relationship. And now I'm making a decision whether or not we are going to stay in this relationship. And no matter where a person is in their life, that the gift of life is that we don't get to stop evolving, right? We don't get to stop our growth process. And if we're open to it, so the suffering doesn't have to be everlasting, and we can take it as a launch pad and a jumping point to keep moving. So in my case, it was this crisis of relationship. So do I stay connected to my friend? Do I let him go for some other vision? And in that, it moved me to get space from my life. So in that trip, that 10-day trip where I went to get space to think about this relationship and what it meant to me vis-a-vis my entire career and my purpose and mission, it forced me into thinking about, well, what is my purpose and mission, and what are we doing, and how important is all of that in my life? And in that, in that 10-day trip, my father had asked me, and he's very non-judgmental, never asked me about my, spiritual connection or anything. He went through his own spiritual journey. Both my parents did. And he asked me about it on this trip. And I almost felt embarrassed because I wasn't thinking about that at all in my life. Like, I wasn't thinking spiritually. I grew up in a spiritual home. So the idea of living with, the divine unfolding wasn't an uncommon thought. I was always looking for the silver linings and the bright spots in situations. But he was asking me very directly about like my, kind of like a religious connection. And again, that was the seed. It was just this question. It was a prompt. And sometimes it comes from the weirdest places. Like in this case, it was my dad, but it could be a song you're listening to, or it could be a show you're watching. It could come from anywhere where someone prompts the thought while you have the space working through crisis. And that's what I mean by a seed was planted. You're in the right place in the right time to receive the thought that will now lead you in the direction of that unfolding. And eventually, if I trace everything from that moment forward up until I had this big awakening experience, which for me happened, I was walking down the street and I saw a young couple pushing a stroller together. They must have had a newborn. And it was after months of thinking and back and forth, but seeing them pushing the stroller together, which was like the symbol of a certain type of life, right? A quieter life, a home-based life. It had the symbolism of many things that were calling to my heartstrings at the time. That was like the apex. And right after that, I had this kind of lightning bolt 2-path experience show up before me. But it didn't happen in one shot. And even from there, getting from, it's funny because having an awakening experience is beautiful. I'm almost more interested in what happens next when I speak to people. Like, well, then what did you do? Like, what happens after that?
Well, it's the integration of that experience, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think so many people seek, I want a spiritual awakening, and then they have it. They think it's going to be different than it is. Maybe they're disappointed. They had certain expectations. They thought it would be this amazing panacea where suddenly angels are singing and everything seems clear. And then it's sort of like the Buddhist, philosophy before awakening, do the laundry, after awakening, do the laundry, or whatever that saying is. It's the same thing. It's like, and what you're talking about is that unfolding. But when you saw those two paths, did one path feel, I mean, obviously the path you chose felt like the path that needed to be walked, but did the other path, could you see sort of a similar outcome, or was it like one path was going to be joy, like as you talk about these conditions, this intention, this certainty, this joy, and the other path was going to be like despair and pain? Or was it just maybe two different paths and you could have ended up at the same destination? Do you have a sense for that?
For me, it did not feel like there were two same end goals. I
Okay.
I could have been happy in both. I felt like happiness wasn't on the line,
Mm,
but wholeness might have been, right? Like a deep sense of fulfillment, the meaning element behind it. There was, again, this was a pretty extreme example, right? So in the world of rock music, the people that I was looking up to at the time, most of them had lives that did not reflect the type of
mm,
life that I would have
mm-hmm.
wanted to live. So I was
Got
looking
it.
up and I saw these people, and they
Mm-hmm.
had the money and they had the fame, and most importantly, they were living their dream. They were on stage and being creatives, and that's what spoke to me. However, when I looked into their personal lives, they were all
Mm,
suffering from some form of like deep darkness, of deep
mm-hmm.
anxiety or depression, and they were, their home lives were all very, very. It was riddled with pain. Like you could see people suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they had either attempted to or went and decided to leave this plane early. And so,
Hmm.
when you see that picture and like you look at what success is, that question of what is success or when is success, which I think a lot of the Western world is driven by, ultimately I think it underlies humanity. Humans want to be successful. We want to live whatever our definition of success is. That is what we go towards. And every culture and every society has their version of what success looks like, and we deeply and desperately want to move in the direction of that because we're wired to know that that's what's going to give us safety, and that's how we'll get acceptance, and that's how we're going to get love, and that's how we're going to get all the things we're wired for. And so we're running away from this feeling of failure and running in the direction of this thing called success. But we rarely stop to consider what that actually looks like or means
Mm-hmm.
at a fundamental level
And
for you.
at a
Yeah,
personal
personal
level.
level. Yeah.
Right. Right. So in the book, you talk about these spiritual moments perhaps leading you to the placeless, which I thought was so interesting. What does that mean, placeless?
I grew up in a world where God was the word that we spoke about when we speak about God or a deity. And the older that I got, the more mature that I got, the more I see that there's a lot of different words we can use to describe that which can't be described,
Mm.
right? And so the placeless is exactly what it sounds like. You can't find it in space time, and yet there's a reality that you could know as deeply true from within. And so there's nowhere you can go. There's no place on earth that you can go and say, now I'm there, right? I got there.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exist in that way. And yet it's an ever present, always intuitive knowing and intuitive experience that most of us, I would say all of us actually at different points have touched in some way or another. And it's now we're talking about varying degrees of
Mm-hmm.
how much we're living in something that's beyond space and time and that's coming
Mm-hmm.
through us. So you can call that flow, you can call that presence, you can call that godliness, you can call that chi, you can call that any of the languages we use to describe the energy that goes beyond time and space, where there's an aliveness, a
Mm-hmm.
wholeness that's there, and
Mm-hmm.
and there's an amazing line from one of these Hasidic masters. His name is Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and he says, "The God you knew yesterday, you can't know today, and the God you know today, you won't know tomorrow." And it's this idea of it's an ever unfolding experience, and it's not the same every day. Our
Mm-hmm.
day to day, we're moving through this placeless experience, and as you touch that, there's a awakening to a oneness, an integratedness, a wholeness. I think beyond it all, we don't have a better word for it than maybe love. And love doesn't come close because I think like the average person walks around with a romantic definition of love,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe a familial definition of love. But what I'm saying here is it's more of it's a consciousness of where there's a lack of separation. Like a unity is even an oversimplification, but it defies our regular boundaries. So like when I see you, it's like you're seeing yourself in another and you're seeing them in you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think how you're talking about it and how I think about it in some ways is it has that ineffability that you can't describe, but you know it in the moment that you feel it. And perhaps that moment is also fleeting.
Mm-hmm. It can be.
But that we're seeking more of that moment to come back to. That we're seeking that place of placelessness, I guess.
Yeah, something interesting about kind of the awakening or enlightenment experience is it's paradoxical in nature, because how it works is we are natural wanters and seekers, right? We naturally, everyone in the world is looking to get somewhere or to get something. And if anyone speaks about an enlightenment or an awakening experience, so that becomes another thing to want. And which objectifies spirituality, and yet it's a necessary evil, because if I don't tell you about it, then you're still running after the job or the relationship or the bank account. So like I have to talk about it. So now you want the thing that's maybe a little bit more internal than the other, but the end goal isn't to now want that. It's actually to let go of that too, right? And you have to almost go through the path of moving in the direction of something higher to get to the most inner point, which is recognizing that this moment is the deepest, most spiritual experience you can have every moment.
Well, it sort of reminds me of when you're in meditation, and in that moment when you realize you were just completely gone, like there was no physical body, you were expanded, you were connected, you were transcendent. But yet in that moment that you realize that that's where you were, the moment is no longer.
Yes.
And then you go back to trying to seek that moment again, now having an expectation of potentially what that moment is going to look like, and maybe never getting to that exact type of moment in the same way again.
Yeah, a good friend of mine who does a lot of meditation facilitating told me once what he finds the biggest block to a spiritual experience is the desire to have a spiritual experience. Right? So it's like when you go into a meditation, if you think you're going to have a certain experience, or you feel like you need to have a certain experience for it to be that way, because you once had a feeling or you once had that thought. So now you're caught in, you've once again objectified what's possible in the ineffable mystery of the next moment.
Right. And even in the moment, you're having the experience, not realizing that you're having the experience until you're out of the experience to look back and say, oh my God, that was the experience that I just had. It's like, it really gets your mind a little bit jumbled, because it's like, how do you want to get to these places of transcendence, of connection, of placelessness, but it's almost in the acknowledgement of it that it robs it of some of the placelessness of it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we need to oversimplify. We make things very, like humans love complexity, and we can use like really profound language. And I love language because it's a great way to bring something from the potential space of my mind and share it, outside. We love to share what's on the inside, but, we're simple beings. So simply, peace, real peace and joy, you're there. Right? Meaning it doesn't have to be more than that. The fact that we still think it might have to be more than that is the seeking part of the mind that's trying to run out in the other direction. You're there. And so like, even when you wake up in that moment of meditation, you're like, oh, that was it. It's like, so you can laugh at that too. It's like, oh, right. And this is it also. This is the other it.
Right. I love that. This is it also. Yeah. So, what was really interesting to me in reading your book is you talk about having the knowledge, and I think we're sort of talking about this already, is you had the knowledge, and that knowledge is power, but you weren't necessarily living the knowledge to be in this spiritual space. And I think, in the psychological field and maybe in other spiritual areas, we call that spiritual bypassing. Could you speak a bit to that? Because I think I'm teaching a class right now. This is coming up in my class of how you define spiritual bypassing and how it can show up in the world for people who are seeking these spiritual experiences, these spiritual awakenings. It's been a while since I've talked to you about what I'm up to. I want to first start by thanking so many of my supporters who have supported me on Patreon and in my Circle community. What's so exciting now is we have my new Circle community up and running, where if you want to contribute to supporting the podcast, you can do so at different levels for different values. So head on over to my Circle group. You can actually find the link in the show notes below. And there's opportunities to continue to support the podcast. And I have to say, your support of the podcast is frankly what has kept this podcast going over time. I have been funding the podcast solely by myself. I get a little bit of money in advertising dollars, but not a lot. So anything that you can give, if you have found value in this podcast, and it's not just giving without anything back, I will give back to you. You will be a part of this community with opportunities for discounts and conversations and ask Amy anythings. But it's a great opportunity for you to support what hopefully has helped you over the many, many years. Also, there's so many other ways now that you can work with me. I am offering a group course called Live Your Life Backwards, which is finishing its first cohort this winter and has been absolutely incredible. There's retreats coming up. There's workshops. There's one-on-one sessions with me. So many options that we can work together. So make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed to my podcast, and make sure you're subscribed to my newsletter, where you will get a free soul wisdom workbook to help you dig deeper into the virtues that you want to be living in this lifetime. We all need so much more spirituality now. We are in a spiritual crisis, and I'm giving you so many tools to tap into your own spirituality. So check out, and don't forget to subscribe to Life, Death, and the Space Between so you never miss an episode.
So when I think about spiritual bypassing, it's almost like you got the idea, and because I want it, that's enough. Mm-hmm. See, I know about it and I want it. So isn't that enough? And so now I can just play. I can play as if, because I know it. I've learned the idea, and I feel attached to it because I want that thing. And so then I stop there. That's enough for me. And so I pretend as if I have it. It would be like, you're driving down the street and, you see a home you want to purchase. So it's like, now I know the home I want, and I want it. And I feel like I want it. So it's as if I live there. But if you don't go inside and you don't sign on it, you don't own that home. You can see it. You could even touch it. You could even go and ask the realtor to let you inside and see it, so you can actually see all the things. But it's different seeing the rooms and sleeping in the bed, and that's your home. Right? It's a
and
very
living in that space.
Right. Until you live there, exactly, you're not living there. And for me, in that process, I did go on this journey when I got to Jerusalem and spent years. It was probably 6 or 7 years of real deep study. I'm saying a low hour day for me was 10 hours of study. Like I was studying 10 to 16 hours every single day for years on end. Until I met my wife, and then then the number probably dropped to like 8 to 10 hours a day. But a lot of study, prayer. There was prayer also, but it wasn't until another crisis point showed up in my life when there was this recognition of, wait, I know so much, and yet I still find myself angry, and I'm still finding myself repressing emotion, and I'm still finding myself having these, outbursts, and I'm getting defensive. And when you notice that actually it there's so much shame in that, because wait a second, I thought I did the work. How many people that I speak to who've read like every self-help book under the sun, and they're like, and I'm still a mess. So,
but isn't that the part that, to me, what you just described is actually the spiritual experience? Is I'm feeling angry right now, and maybe you should be feeling angry, or you should be feeling sad, or whatever it is, but I'm not going to act on that emotion. I'm just going to feel it. That, to me, is really the crux of spirituality in many ways. It's like, I'm not going to just lash out at the person through anger, but are you saying that you shouldn't feel anger?
Oh,
Like,
no.
okay.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't feel the emotion. Sorry if it was unclear, I was lashing out. I was, I went to binge eat or drink. I went to, I was taking it out on myself and others.
So you weren't feeling the emotions of it all.
Yeah, well, I was feeling it and then running from it. Right. And so that was the lack of spirituality, where it was knowing based on knowledge what I was supposed to be feeling or doing, that based on a false perception of how things were supposed to be. And this was, it was less spiritual. It was more philosophical. Like there was a long period of time where I thought I was immersed in spirituality when it was spiritual philosophy. And those are very different things. You can learn deep ideas, but if it's philosophy, if it's ideas, psychology is like 10 steps closer to spiritual, like maybe way more than 10 steps closer to spirituality than philosophy. Because now you're actually going into the psyche, you're going into the body,
into the soul, right? Psyche is soul.
Right, psyche is soul, right? So we're moving inward, right? Until you get to the inside of it all, which is you're part of something so much more vast. But if you're stuck on the ideas, if you're stuck in the philosophy, so now you're still going through a human experience and you're feeling all these emotions. But if you don't have the tools, which I didn't have, if you don't have the direction, which I didn't have, or the framework, so now you're stuck with a lot of big ideas and you're still human.
Right.
So, yeah. And so that's, for me, what led to, you have all this knowledge, but it was completely unintegrated. I didn't have that next step drawn out for me. And it took moving into kind of the deeper parts of Torah, which was like that was the epicenter of my study at the time. So going into the world of Kabbalah, going into the world of Hasidut, which really bridges consciousness and the psyche with all of these ideas, alongside therapy, alongside seeing what different group dynamics were doing. 12-step was really powerful at the time, and a lot of psychology, New Age spirituality, finding language that bridged what I was learning with the experience that I wanted to live, because it was natural. If on a personal level, the dissonance felt very real, because when I was in the band, I was living joy and creative expression, but it was devoid of maybe a higher meaning. And here I was living with a lot of higher meaning, but it was devoid of the kind of the authentic joy and creativity. And it took marrying those two worlds in my life path to finally come alive, and to fully embrace and accept who I am, which I think that's the core of spiritual growth, of psychological growth, is really stepping into that full embodying, embracing of self, wherever you are, here now. Like that's the beginning of everything. Now we can have a conversation of what happens next, but until you can really fully accept that, like, you're fine right here now in your breakdown, right in your lowest point, that's good too. It's all perfect right where you are. And so feel it. You're feeling sadness. If sadness is fine, sadness is a good thing. It tells me that there was something I loved and that's not there right now. Right. And anger is not a bad thing. Anger is a beautiful thing. It tells me that I'm afraid of something. What am I afraid of? Right. Like, I learned so much about my reality from my emotions. They're there for us. Right. And it's communication that we're having. So it's almost like when I first started sharing and teaching from this type of modality, less in the kind of philosophical space, a lot of people just assumed that I went into the world of psychology. They're like, oh, did you become a psychologist? And it's no, I didn't. But you can't talk about spirituality without first going into the world of emotions and psychology first, because that's the portal. The portal into everything is through your experience. Right.
Yeah. Yes. And I think we've gotten so separate from it. That's sort of like we see in sort of more evidence-based psychotherapy, they're really just about like, how do I make these feelings stop versus how do I understand the soul where these feelings are coming from. I want to talk a little bit about, from the book, it's very straightforward, the 3 conditions. What do you see as the 3 conditions? And what is obviously we're not going to go into the details of all the book, but the 3 conditions and the map in which we want to take to get there.
The oversimplification, I mean, look, on the title, the subtitle is intention, joy, and certainty, right? Those are the 3. What that means very practically and very simply when I use those words is the first of the 3 conditions is knowing that you're good at your core, that your essence has always been good and never not good. And I'm going to stop myself because I'll probably ramble on. So the core is good. The second condition is that that life is good. And I use good, but good is a trigger word for people. It's one of these things where if I say it anywhere and you can feel the energy in the room shift. What do you mean I'm good? What do you mean people are good? What do you mean life is good? And let me point to all the bad, right? I can point to all the bad. But when I say good, what I mean is there's a difference between good and bad, lowercase good and bad, which simply is defined as what I like and don't like. That's how most of us are walking around most of the time. If I like it or I understand it, I think it's good. If I don't like it or don't understand it, I think it's bad. That's how most of us walk around with our definitions internally. When I say good, I mean capital G, in alignment with an overarching vision, plan, intention for reality. And so if the first piece is intention, that I recognize that my soul's intention for coming into this world was to find and express its natural goodness, to experience that all of it is there.
Right. I say it's natural essence.
There you go.
Right, that's what you're talking about.
Yes. The essence.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the essence. Certainty, unlike how sometimes it's perceived, certainty doesn't mean I'm certain things will go a certain way or they will go my way, but it's a certainty in the fact that life is unfolding with a higher intention, that there's wisdom and knowledge embedded in creation, and there's an interplay that's happening. And so we're all collectively evolving together. All of history has been an evolution of consciousness getting us up to this point, and we're still moving forward. So that certainty allows myself to surrender my ego's thought on how things are supposed to be and follow the threads that life is leading me down, because it's okay. Good, like another word for that goodness is it's okay. I'm okay. Life's okay. Even if things are not okay, but that not okay is okay. Like it's okay for me to be not okay. And the fact that life is falling apart, like that's also okay. If we can hold space for it, and falling apart is okay. And building yourself up is okay. And, regressing into ego is okay. And it's all natural. It's all part of the unfolding. So if those 2 things are there, so the natural state that a person falls back into is joy. Because joy is our natural state. At the deepest level, when you sit with children, I have 4 little kids at home. Until they get to the age where their egos have developed strong enough that now they have their opinions, which is pretty young.
Yeah.
But until that point, it's like, unless they're in some physical discomfort, they're bubbly and joyful and everything's fine. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay. And very present, extremely present, not holding on to the past, not thinking about tomorrow, very present. And of course, that is the unevolved version of where we're trying to get to, because part of the reason they can be so present is their brains haven't developed yet to hold on to the past and to,
Right.
fear for the future. But what we're given is a glimpse into what happens when you live there. When you live there, you're joyful and present.
Right. Well, what I'm always fascinated by with little kids is that when they are in the sandbox or they have a fight with someone or something happens, there is no grudge held. It's not like I don't, particularly when they're very little, they never say like, I don't want, very rarely, my kids never did, like, I don't want to play with so-and-so again because he or she took my toy. It's like there is just that living in the moment. And as adults, we project onto them, oh, well, maybe they're not going to want to play with, Bobby again because Bobby wasn't nice to them or Bobby bit them or whatever it was. It's like they don't have that, exactly what you said. Like they don't hold on to that past or think about what might happen in the future. It's just like that happened. I'm moving on from it. Let's go. I still care about this person. This is my friend. How could I not? Why wouldn't I want to play with them?
Yeah, and they can move forward, and that that presence is linked with that joy. So the oversimplification on the three conditions are: if we can tune back into our innate goodness or our innate essence, really tune into and align with the goodness of reality, that life is not accidental, that things are not chaos, but that there's a divine order, and allow those two parts of our psyche to hold on to that. We step back into that space of presence, of joy, of peace. And instead of living life for joy, we can live life from joy.
And we know that state how? Like, how do you know when you are in a state of joy? And and once you know you're in that state, is it sort of like the meditation that the awareness of being in that state then takes you out of that state?
Yeah, my answer to that is I love how Eckhart Tolle ends his book, The Power of Now, when someone says, how do you know when you're in a state of surrender? And I think he ends the book by saying something to the effect of when you don't have the question anymore. And that's how you know. Like if you have the question, am I feeling joy? Probably not feeling joy right now. Right? Am I at peace? Right. The question itself is an indication that, like, well, you may have some of it, but we're not really there. Because when you're there, you're there. You're just there.
Right.
And you know. And the thing is, you know, and everyone around you knows. You can't, because the first thing you bring into any room you step into is your presence and your energy. And everyone knows. We all know how our friend is doing, a spouse, our child. You walk into a coffee shop, you know the energy in the coffee shop. You know how people are doing. And it's not something to overthink. This is not an overthinking thing, right? You're there. It's like, yeah, right. This is what it was about.
So you talk in the book about synchronicities and how synchronicities start to show up when you're living in this more, I would say, aligned space. How did synchronicities show up for you? Because you had some pretty profound experiences that just sort of things kind of fell in line. I always call it like the lily pads popping up for you and you just need to take the next step. And how do you understand the conditions integrating with like synchronicity, manifestation, like all of that kind of coming into focus?
Sure. So the second half of the subtitle is how intention, joy, and certainty will lead you to your supercharged life. So I was looking for the right word, and my publishers like the word supercharged. But that's what we're talking about, which is when those lily pads are showing up and everything just feels electric. Things feel more than, even though they were always there. When you're in that state of joy, when you're feeling good, right? You're feeling aligned. So you get two things. There's the psychological benefit, and then there's the spiritual or energetic benefit. The psychological benefit is when you're looking for good, you end up seeing good. When you're looking for opportunities, you end up seeing opportunities. When you're assuming that things are going to work out, you find ways to get to the next lily pad, right? So there's the psychological element here. And when you feel bad, right, and all the data points to this, when you feel bad, right, your vision is constricted, like your actual physical vision is constricted, and so is your perspective. So even if there was a pathway forward, you might not see it, right? So I would say that's like the baseline. The level one is, as you're going through life, you stay in a more lucid, clear state, a more present state, a joyful state. So that optimism and that hope allows you to see pathways to get to where you want to go to because you believe they're there. Then there's the secondary level, which that's where I think a lot of, when you use the word manifesting, or we think of like kind of the magic of life, which is, we're talking about attracting certain people or events or things in space and time that actually do bring us to this next level. So I was thinking about you asked about my personal experiences. I feel like it's all day, every day, everywhere. The fact that we're having this conversation now here while I'm traveling and not, for the last 9 months while we've been trying to connect, while I'm at home, like this is perfect. And why is it perfect? So sometimes we get to see how things unfold. But it's not like they're not unfolding that way in this moment. I was once somewhere, and one of the guys who we were doing an event, and one of the speakers who spoke before me got up and said, I've got this amazing story of synchronicity I want to share with you. And everyone's on edge. Mm-hmm. And he says, okay, so I was at this bus stop and I had this amazingly important meeting to go to. And I got there a couple minutes late and I missed the bus. And that's the story. And
everybody's like, and what's next?
Right. And so before even speaking about synchronicity, we have to start by saying, just because you didn't see how it turned out doesn't mean it didn't happen. Right. Like that's the first step. Is we think that miracles are only when I found it. Oh, and this happened and then that happened. And look what was the final conclusion of the story. That's how amazing it was what happened to this guy or girl. Right. That's how amazing this was. But we have to realize every moment is like that. Like that's the starting point. Like there was never a moment that's not synchronicitous. It's always happening that way. But sometimes we get a glimpse, and those glimpses are like what you're talking about. So I, recently, right before the 3 conditions came out, I was looking around at different individuals getting endorsements for the book. And my mother's been like a very powerful spiritual guide in my life, from as long as I can remember. And one of the people in her life that was very powerful was Maryanne Williamson. And she was talking to me one day about like, had I ever
your mom
read
or Maryanne? Your mom?
Oh, no. My mom was speaking to me about Maryanne. And she was like, oh, like, by the way, like, I really think that you'll like this book that she had put out, and, put her political views aside, like, she's got her actual spiritual teachings are beautiful and deep. And I had like dabbled in some of her stuff. I'd never really read her work. So, okay, that was in my mind. And then 2 hours later, I was watching something on YouTube, and a video of hers came up like in my feed, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I watched this video, and it was really beautiful and lots of good things in there. So I said, you know what, I'll buy the book. And I went on to Audible and I downloaded one of her books. And then I went on to Facebook to make a post for that day. And as I got on to Facebook, I saw a friend of mine was sitting with Maryanne in his apartment, like 2 miles from my house. And it was posted like that hour. So I was like, wow, that's wild. So I reached out to him. I said, are you sitting with Maryanne right now? And he said, she was just here. Now she's with our other mutual friend. You should reach out and call her. And I called and I said, hey, are you sitting with Maryanne right now? And she said, I'm going to see her again tomorrow. Why? What's up? And I said, well, look, she was extremely impactful on my mom's life. My mom at the time was going through a really difficult time. And I'd love to just go say thank you. There's a letter that I wanted to give to her. And I'd love to, give her a copy of my book. It's all the same to me. So she said, great, come by in the morning and I'll give you the book. And which, by the way, that till now, if the story ended there, it's like, that's pretty amazing. The 6 hours before, my mom's telling me to get her book. 3 hours later, I have her book. And now I'm told the next morning I can hand her my book. Right. So that's already like amazing. Right. So the very next morning, I get up and I go to this woman's house, and I walk in, I give her the letter, I give her the book, and she says, okay, thanks so much. I'm meeting her in the north. It's like 3 hours north. So I'll let you know when she gets it. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. And I get in the car, I start driving away. And 5 minutes later, I get a call from this woman, and she says, you're not going to believe it. I have a flat tire. Would you like to come with me and drive me up to the north and spend the day with me and Maryanne? So I said, yeah, why not? Let's go. So I drove back and I picked her up, and we ended up spending, a beautiful day in the north of Israel together. Deep conversation. Of course, I was able to give her the letter and I gave her the book. But it went from, she wasn't in my consciousness at all we spent the entire day together, went out for dinner the next night, and she was so gracious. She, called my mom, and she spent time going through my book. And in the end, she did give an endorsement to the 3 conditions. And that falls out of the sky. Right? That's not something that you plan, but you have to be open to, right? Like, that's why you can tell, and stories like that are happening all day, every day. If I told you how many crazy things happened in this last week, you wouldn't even believe me. It's unbelievable. The world is filled with it. And so when you stay open to it, you do get the psychological benefits, but I don't see any of that as psychological. That is magical, right? Like, and those things are happening. And staying in that space allows them to come more and more. And the more I find, like, it's like when you get up in the morning and you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, then you end up, stubbing your toe.
And the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I always
very
think of
good.
That.
Yeah. And it just keeps going, right? Like, because when you're there, it's more than psychological. Your energy is now flowing into the next and into the next and into the next. So when people ask me if there's one thing they can adopt in their, spiritual practice, without question, other than, like the go-to is meditation, but like if assuming that a person's meditating, in their life, is really, really grabbing onto the opening hour of your day, or even 20 minutes. Like, how you start the day is so important, because you're going to bring your energy with you everywhere you go afterwards. And that creates a cascading effect. Everything is building into the next.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I also say I call them the tiny miracles, like recognize how the tiny miracles start showing up, because the more, like you said, the more you shift your consciousness to that space, your energy to that space, the more you start to see these tiny miracles constantly showing up for you.
Absolutely.
Well, Moshe, thank you so much for your time today, for this truly enlightening spiritual discussion. I always like a deep spiritual discussion. If people want to learn more about your work, you are a best-selling Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author. Where can they find your work, your books, your TEDx, your teachings, your lectures, all of it?
Oh, well, thank you. Everything is found at moshegersht.com, which is my name, but YouTube, Instagram is probably where I probably put up the most consistent content, if people looking for new content. But it's all on the website, and Amazon's got all the books, wherever people go to find their next step in their spiritual journey.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for your wisdom and insights. It was just a beautiful, heart-filled conversation, and I loved it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's a delight to sit with you.
You too. Thanks. Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.